Welcome to the first edition of the EPIC Conversations. EPIC Conversation is an initiative by EPIC Foundation to bring the global leaders to discuss the developing India as a powerhouse in electronics products and semiconductor products. Today's discussion is focused on making India as a product nation for electronics and semiconductor products. To put in the perspective, I would refer to a famous dialogue from Indian film Diwar, मेरे पास माँ है. So today India has market, India has manpower and India has manufacturing, but the pie is missing, the products are missing. So today we are going to talk about how to make India as a product nation, and to discuss this we have two of the tallest leaders of electronics and semiconductor industry, Dr. Ajay Chaudhary, founder of HCL, and Mr. Vinod Dham, popularly known as father of the Pentium processor, a semiconductor veteran. So I welcome you to this discussion about making India as a product nation. So I will start with a broader question. India is aspiring to become a $5 trillion economy in next 5 to 7 years, and out of that $1 trillion economy is going to be digital economy. So question to Ajay sir, how do you see the role of electronics in driving this $1 trillion digital economy so that we can become a electronics nation?
So basically the way I look at it is that electronics will occupy between 30 to 40% of this 1 trillion economy. And I expect that the electronics business from India, whether it's domestic or exports, would be somewhere between 300 to 400 billion dollars, closer to 400 billion. So I think there's a great opportunity for India to achieve that 1 trillion digital dream with electronics as a very major part of that. And within this will be, of course, the semiconductor piece also.
That, Vinod sir, your view that how semiconductor will power this $1 trillion digital economy?
Well, semiconductor is the basic foundation for all of the electronics, and the cost of importing semiconductor is very, very high. So if we want to create a local, domestic $1 trillion economy, we will have to manufacture some of these things internally, domestically.
Okay. So little bit going in the history, in 80s and 90s, India had many electronics product companies in an electronics brand. But today if we see, although we are manufacturing large amount of electronics, but there are hardly any Indian electronics product companies or electronics brands which are left over, and the decline over the next 3 decades is very clearly seen. So how do you see what caused this decline of India's electronics ecosystem, which was pretty vibrant in 80s and 90s?
In the 70s, 80s, the government policy was clearly to support design and development of products. And there was a program which was called Phased Manufacturing Program, under which the government used to encourage people to add value in India, which drove the design ecosystem and then the product ecosystem, and hence huge amount of Indian brands got created, whether you look at computers, you look at white goods, you look at televisions, a whole bunch of Indian brands got created. And then the government in its own way came in and signed the WTO agreement on electronics and IT. And as a result of that, the whole market was opened up to global competition. When the global competition entered, the government had really not done enough work to help preserve that ecosystem. and hence slowly various brands started vanishing. And there was no real strategy to support Indian brands, because there are a lot of areas in which India lacks. Cost of money is very high, logistics is poor, cost of power, etc. is high. All these combine to make huge amount of disability factors. And those were not taken care of, so that we could have easily competed with any global brand, but all this was not taken care of. And then there were very serious inverted duty issues also. So all this combined to the, in a manner, decimation of the electronics industry. A lot of small and medium companies got affected and they all closed down. So that has been the serious decline of Indian brands during that period.
I have a slightly different perspective as well. I think the other thing that happened that's not visible in an open way is that in the 90s, the IT began to take hold. And the IT is a service industry. And it's a highly profitable and highly de-risked industry. All it takes is a person with a computer to sit down and start writing a code, and you can make 50% profit on it. Manufacturing is a much more longer term, longer return on investment, more complicated issue that requires also a lot of scale, which IT does too, and that's why we have Infosys, TCS, and Wipro, amongst many others. And I think the Indian enterprise and businessmen found the easy way out. And in my study, I've seen a lot of people who are doing both manufacturing and wanted to do into software. They ended up just doing software because that was easy way to make money.
Okay. So a lot of people say that the IT revolution which you are talking about was catalyzed by Y2K. That basically created opportunity for IT service industry. Do you see a similar catalytic event for electronics and semiconductor in the current scenario?
See, I have a perspective on that. If you study Y2K, see, companies like Infosys and Wipro have existed for a very long time. They were not known to the outside world. So they really didn't take off till almost the beginning of this century. In an international manner, I'm talking about. They may be doing things here in India, but they were really not big players. And you can go back and trace their revenues in history, and I've done that. I think Infosys started in '82. Not till the Y2K happened did the US companies, I can speak about US because I was in US, that panicked into making sure that the software programs that were written for 50, 60 years would not suddenly expire on the date of 2031st December. Did they start requesting a lot of engineers from India to come to US to look at their code. So it was a perfect storm. I'll tell you the three segments of that storm. One was the Y2K, so need for engineers, and Indian had a lot of talent, so they brought them in to change the code. And they suddenly realized that these kids are not just changing the code, they are updating the code, they are modifying the code, they are making the code better. That they were not simply, snake charmers, they were actually very smart engineers. That was some major recognition on behalf of US industry to say, these guys are pretty talented people. Second thing that happened was what we call dot bomb. The dot bomb after .com suddenly happened when this so-called dream of new economy that everything will happen through internet overnight disappeared. Most of these companies that were using our engineers for Y2K, suddenly their valuations came down to 1/3 of where they were. So cost became a very important element of their being profitable again. And to reduce costs, they looked at the same engineers who had done just the work for them to go back and now do the actual work of development, sustenance, maintenance, whatever work that they needed to do. That is when large scale migration of software work from outside, like US, started coming to India. And the third leg of this entire activity that really helped create a perfect storm in favor of India was the fact that there were companies like Global Crossing, for example, that had laid out for billions and billions of dollars undersea cables to connect Mumbai, for example, as a spot to US, San Francisco, for internet. Internet had just become more commercial in the mid 95 to 2000 with the advent of Netscape browser technology. And that allowed then the Indian engineers sitting in Bangalore to be connected to the American engineers sitting in San Francisco or New York to be just connected real time. That wasn't possible until then, by the way. So the transition of these three activities, connectivity, Y2K, and need for the American industry to go back to find lower cost opportunities, really helped IT take off like a big bang.
Are we sitting on the something similar in electronics semiconductor today, based on the all geopolitical things which are happening today? Do we have a Y2K moment for electronics and semiconductor today? Do you see that opportunity has been created at this point of the time?
Because the way you see the situation, geopolitical situation, everyone is now looking at an alternative to China. And nobody wants a situation to be repeated where supply chains get spoiled. So hence, as a result of that, everybody is looking at an alternative and a resilient supply chain. In addition to all the things that have happened geopolitically, the Ukraine war and the recent zero COVID policy of China is also deterring people for just going to China. So I think this is a terrific opportunity for India to step in, because Vietnam stepped in when there was this discussion of China +1, and Vietnam did brilliantly at what they did. We were too slow. We didn't do it. But now the situation is that you need both design talent as well as manufacturing. So India in the last couple of years has grown manufacturing in a big way in India. The design capability that sits here is going to be the key differentiator between India and Vietnam. And therefore, I think this is a moment we must seize.
See, although I completely agree with Ajay, he very eloquently put down this enormous window of opportunity we have, because China is beginning to not only be suffering from the zero COVID policy, which is more of a tactical issue, however long it lasts. I think strategically they've decided to now focus themselves inwards. For last 40 years they were focused outwards. Now they're going inwards and working on their own domestic, which has opened up an opportunity for us. Like he said, the world is in turmoil. We are there with a great talent pool and a new government. I would give a lot of credit to Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji for having the vision under the umbrella of Atmanirbhar to start focusing also on the electronic side of the world, to say how do we create self-sufficiency, at least for our own domestic economy, if not start exporting and become the largest exporters in the world. And then folks like Ashwini ji and Rajiv ji, both of them are domain experts in their own field. They have done electronics in their background, so they are not necessarily just folks who are political leaders who are pursuing a certain path. They have some understanding of what it takes to put together policies and framework and people to go do that. However, I must say, I have been coming here for 47 years and we've been described as a tiger in the cage, and the tiger has to be unleashed, and now the tiger is unleashed, and the tiger has been in cage for so long that it doesn't know how to run. So it needs to be trained, it needs to be nourished, it needs to be all these issues of tariffs and duty structures and regulatory things. And I know there's a lot of improvement in that area, but still needs to be much, much higher than it is for us to really cultivate a manufacturing domestic as well as getting some foreign companies to come in here to not just sell products, laptops and desktops and servers and computers and storage devices, but manufacture them here. When they manufacture them here, we will create an ecosystem of both know-how, technology, skills, and learn a lot to be able to then sustain it in the long term.
So, when we talk about this geopolitical situation, today we see that especially in the semiconductor area, every country has created large investment programs to bring the semiconductor manufacturing locally. US CHIPS Act, EU has its own basically program, South Korea has a $200 billion investment program, Taiwan similarly, Japan similarly. So, how do you think basically India's own semiconductor mission will play in this global scenario, where everybody is basically trying to build internal capacities? I named all the countries which are doing it, right? And I hear small countries like Morocco and all of those people are also thinking along the same line, that I need semiconductor manufacturing in the country because it's such a strategic thing. So, how do you see India's semiconductor mission being successful in such a volatile environment where everybody is trying to look inwards and build the semiconductor capabilities?
Yes, I think I call ISM, India's semiconductor mission, as Mission Impossible. The reason it's Mission Impossible is not just because suddenly all the world has become more nationalistic and they want to now, like US wants to grow all its semiconductors at home. Europe is again restarting to start bringing up fabs at home. And we are beginning to start just about the time when all these people are waking up to say we want to do it ourselves. So there's an extra barrier to getting us going, on top of the fact that we are 50 years late to coming into this party. The chip industry started 50 years ago. It's gone through several generations of evolution and learning and improvements and building ecosystem and skills. Everything you can think about it. We lack everything about it. And mostly we lack even what we had at the IT when these people suddenly realized in the perfect storm that we need someone like India to take care of our software need. India was ready to receive them. When they came and knocked on Infosys door or Wipro door or TCS door, they were ready to accept the business, train their people with universities that were created within their own campuses inside the enterprise. They created 1-year university program to take large diverse set of engineers from all over India, train them for whatever needs they had so that they can come on board in a very quick way. We do not even have a skilled semiconductor manpower today. If we had it today, my personal guess is a lot of people will be knocking on our door. The reason is even US and Taiwan doesn't have enough semiconductor engineers to do what they need to do in next 10 years, yes, to double the revenue from $500 billion to $1 trillion in semiconductors. So unfortunately we got somewhat caught flat-footed. However, having said that, from what I see, there's a tremendous focus on skill development. I am myself visiting IIT Delhi, I was there, and a lot of programs are starting across the board, a lot of training and skill training, both short term to take the existing engineers and give them very quick programs to become viable, and actually getting MTech and PhD students to be trained in skills. But it takes some time, and so we have no choice. The way I look at it is Mission Impossible may it be, but we have no choice but to be part of it and make it successful.
So you mentioned Mission Impossible, right? Mission Impossible became possible because Tom Cruise was basically driving it, right? Mission Impossible for Indian space happened because somebody named Vikram Sarabhai came and set up the vision, right? And provide that basically iconic leadership, which has basically long-term vision, strategy, and all the necessary ingredients, right? do you think basically to make India's semiconductor mission impossible to possible, do we need somebody like Tom Cruise of Mission Impossible or Vikram Sarabhai of basically ISRO to really make it possible?
Well, actually, that would be the ideal situation, because if you look at the Taiwan situation, Morris Chang actually made Taiwan semiconductors happen. And today, TSMC is the world leader. And they then created a fantastic institution called ITRI that also helped to create capability in every part of semiconductors. So I think what we need definitely is a visionary person like Morris Chang to come here, and also very deep need to create an ITRI type of an institution. It may take us long to do that. We should go and tie up with Taiwan and bring ITRI to India, work together with them, create all that capability in a very fast track manner. And there are enough global Indians who can match the aura and the magic of Morris Chang. So if we actually look around, we can find such people. But we should actually go around doing that rather than do a slow march towards growth. We should take the fast track approach.
So rather than technology leadership, we need a visionary leadership. That's what you're saying, right? In some sense.
I think I would say Ajay is completely right about it. But if you truly look at how the semiconductor industry became a dominant player in US, in Taiwan, in Korea, in Japan, governments in each of those countries played the most significant role in their success. And I'm glad to see that Indian government has finally stepped in to play a very significant role in success of the semiconductor industry here. And clearly, since we are 50 years later, the Morris Changs of India are much older than the Morris Chang was when he left US to go to Taiwan, or when Vikram Sarabhai started his space research. Having said that though, I think there's enough dedicated people, I am one of them, who are absolutely willing to give every bit of what I can, short of, what I will be constrained by physically because of my age, to make it successful. And we will need a lot of people on the ground here.
We need youthness of ideas, not youthness of physical thing, right? We need.
And you see, one interesting part is that it's not just the central government. The state governments are also stepping up to provide support for semiconductors. Now, the US government is giving 30% benefit in terms of investments. India is giving 50% capital benefit. If you invest 10 million, government will put in 5 billion. But now state governments are saying, I'll put another 20%. Now suddenly somebody has to put up a $1 billion plant or a $5 billion plant. They don't need to spend more than 30%. So I think it's extremely attractive. That's one part. The other attraction is the size of the Indian market. So I think there are some good things also going for the semiconductor piece today, which will attract people. I think what we need is one or two good organizations to come in and invest here, and then others will follow. But I think that's something that we must look forward.
So coming to investments and the incentives provided by the government, I believe when India created the PLI scheme sometime back, 5 to 7 years back, probably it was one of the best incentive scheme for electronics manufacturing industry, because rest of the world was basically focusing on providing the incentive on the taxes and all of those things. But India provided the benefits on the amount you produce, right, which is direct benefit, because sometimes it takes 5 to 7 years for companies to become profitable. So if you give tax benefit, it's basically not very good. So do you think the PLI scheme, especially in electronics manufacturing, because we have now 5 years history for that, has it served the intent for which it was created to jumpstart the India's electronics ecosystem?
Absolutely. I think it's a terrific scheme because I think for many years good schemes were being looked around. But the disability factors of India were actually coming in the way. The PLI scheme removes a lot of the disability factors and I think pushes people to perform. And against this performance is when they get the incentives. So I think it's an excellent scheme. I think they missed out a few pieces there, but even then, it's a terrific scheme, and it is a scheme around which we have actually seen manufacturing move in quite a big way. Today, India is one of the largest producers of smartphones in the world. That's all happened because of the PLI scheme. But we should have actually done a lot more.
And I would go on to add that we should even do a lot more than we have.
Yeah,
The reason is the businesses, by definition, are risky. That is, the risk comes from the uncertainty in the business. Economy can change. For example, right now, for the last couple of years, like I just said, due to Russia-Ukraine war, energy prices, inflation due to COVID, a lot of businesses throughout the world are suffering. Nobody could have foreseen that, say, 5-7 years ago before COVID happened. If you create production link schemes, incentive schemes that are based on some rigid formula, then a business 5 years later may face a very uncertain situation, not be able to sustain it. So you have to allow some flexibility. It should be not so rigidly framed into the policy, where you watch it, you observe it, and you work with the business and you modify it if need be to get to where you want to get to, mutually working together. I think that will be one of my requests to the government, is not to be so rigidly bureaucratic, but also dynamically be working with the business that is wanting to come in to really make it successful. That should be the end goal. From what I read about China in the 80s, late 70s and 80s, practically they didn't really have as sophisticated and intelligent bureaucracy like we have here. So they fundamentally gave vast lands, vast amount of electricity, vast amount of labor, vast amount of water, practically free for up to 30 years, to say, please come in, set up and train our people, build your product, take them and sell them wherever you sell them so far at a lower cost than you do. Now, I'm not saying we should copy that in today's environment, but we need to have that type of a thinking if we want to get large businesses, because one of the things that I feel India lacks is large scale manufacturing. There are lots of small businesses, but manufacturing cannot happen in a cost effective way unless there's a large volume associated with manufacturing. And we do not have very large electronics manufacturing houses that I know of in the country today.
Okay. I think that situation is
But I
very
think one
fast changing.
interesting thing that I would like
Yeah.
to go on from what you mentioned, the flexibility part. I saw that happen recently in semiconductors, in the policy itself. The government decided that they will pass on 50% for all kinds of semiconductors. And I think that was a very quick decision taken by the government, which I believe that both the ministers, they understood the requirement and they immediately acted upon it. And now we have become more positive in terms of attracting more people to come here. Because whether it's ATMP or whether it's compound semiconductors or it is display, how does it matter? Let's get everybody in today. We need everybody here.
So, analyzing the India's progress in electronics manufacturing, okay, typically when we talk to industry people, almost everybody concur that electronics manufacturing, whatever 50-60% of our requirement we are manufacturing today, which was hardly 5 to 10% 7 years back. So, it's a fantastic progress. But when we look one level deeper, it is seen that most of the activities are centered around EMS and assembly of the products, which in electronics or contract manufacturing for the electronics contribute about 8 to 12% value addition in this, right? And those products are basically being considered as a make in India category, where the intent of the Make in India was basically 50% value addition. So how do we go from this 8 to 12% value addition to truly 50% or 40% value addition, rather than some formula by which everybody is qualifying for 50%, right? So what changes we have to make in the way the 50% value addition is calculated today, to the point where it will really mean the real value addition, not just a formula which qualifies everybody to 50%.
So I think the first flexibility that needs to be brought in is to add to the PLI schemes of India. They have been introduced in many sectors, but not a single PLI scheme except telecom has a design element in it. So if you actually incentivize design and value addition in India, the ball game will change. So I think that's the change we need to bring about, and government should be flexible enough to relook at the PLI scheme and change it. And in telecom, the minister took that initiative, created that scheme which has design as a part of it. I think that needed to be done for every part of electronics and actually every part of every PLI in this country. Because we now, to be genuinely Atmanirbhar Bharat, we need to be designing in India and buying components in India, so that we do genuine value addition and not that 8 or 10% piece that we are doing today.
So
I will add a little bit different on top of what I just said. Of course, we should be doing that. If you just basically look at, say, an iPhone, then iPhone that sells for, say, $1,000 in the market. And I did this analysis recently, sat there till 4 a.m. in the morning because I was preparing a talk for IIT Delhi. And this data was not easily available, so I had to really extract it out and put it together. In that $1,000, the actual cost of components in the iPhone was $500. The $500 was the profit minus marketing, sales, or some overhead. That the bulk of that 50% left was all taken by Apple. In the remaining 50%, that $500, there were liquid crystal displays, there were SoC chips, there were components, there was RF, there were sensors, all, and there were a variety of companies supplying those things at cost to Foxconn, which is the one who assembles it. The actual amount of money made by Foxconn, which is a value add, was less than 5%, $24 or something, out of the $500. So if you look at that picture and answer your question, then it comes back to saying we need to own more of the intellectual property. The reason Apple makes that bulk of the money is because it's the only thing that's done for iPhone in the world in Cupertino is the design. Yeah. Everything else is done everywhere else. Yeah. They don't do nothing, including the steel casing. So if we can add in India, and we will with time, intellectual property, some innovation, some design capability, it doesn't really have to be all material based. For example, if an iPhone is done in India, which is meant for our local people, where, for example, some Aadhaar type of thing is built into it, or payment is built into it, our wallet, our way of doing things, not necessarily American way of doing things, or repairability is built into it. So you can open the phone and do some extent repairability and extend its life. It could take off, and like I just said, then you have a local manufacturer making significant amount of margin and profit out of that.
So both of you are saying if you have to go from this 8 to 10% value addition to real 50% value addition, the design and product ownership can add some 30-40% more. Absolutely. And really make it 50% value addition in the country.
Absolutely.
And also, if you own the product and the brand and the IP, then it makes us really self-reliant. One part is value addition, and once you own the product, then you basically have the complete control over the destiny of the product.
See,
as well.
look at how China created brands. They have the best brands today in smartphones, and they really rule the world. But how did they start? Actually, Taiwan helped them create this whole thing. Taiwan helped them to create designs, they taught them how to do designs, and then they added branding to it. And I think they have been very successful in terms of creating global brands. So India also needs to come in and try and create brands first in India and then go for global brands tomorrow. And for that, you need volume. You have to have the large manufacturing piece that Vinod talked about. And I think that's very essential. So we need to create a lot of champions in India who would be global sized, global brands as we go forward to be successful.
So I think I want to tell you that one of the opportunities India has, because India has enormous talent. We only are talking about IT and electronics and technology. There's enormous talent in sciences. There's a talent in healthcare, in medicine, right? If we look at a cross-disciplinary way, and you look at this phone, going forward, Apple's value add in this phone, these phones are no different than the phones that Ajay is talking about that are coming from China, right? Practically same in every regard. The only difference is what's on it, what's in it. And the reason I'm still buying that phone is because it can monitor your blood pressure, your heartbeat, it tells you your exercise. When your heart goes out of rhythm, it tells you watch out. Lot of personal things that are extremely value added. Everybody in this world will pay an extra dollar for living longer or living healthier or things of that nature. All of the innovation in Apple now is going into healthcare. Very few people know about it. Right. If India today even takes where everybody's left at and starts integrating the new ideas, we have unique issues within India. Diabetes is a big issue in India, right? If you start putting some way of people improving their diabetic life or how they take the medicine or regularity of it or extend their life, I bet people will buy an Indian phone over any other phone just because of that reason alone.
So, we all are saying that basically product design and the brand creation is a very important part of making India's journey from manufacturing to product nation, right? Now, one thing which we see in the current ecosystem, that how do we build the component ecosystem in the country, right? And today, whatever manufacturing is happening in the country, most of the components come as a kit from basically global headquarters of the companies to the local manufacturing partner. Means Oppo sends the kit from the Oppo China to Oppo India. Apple sends basically through a supplier the kit to Foxconn and basically Sericity and so on and so forth. So, if we estimate that we are making about $150 billion of electronics today in the country, the local purchase of the components is hardly 7 to 10% of that. So, it is hardly basically $10 billion, and that does not basically create a conducive environment for creating the local ecosystem. So, how do we change from basically getting all the components which go into electronics product coming as a kit from basically global headquarters to a local purchase, where the PO is issued by a local entity to the global semiconductor companies and basically global suppliers of the display, global suppliers of the battery. Right now we don't have any influence on them because we are just getting kits from somebody who is procuring them in China and then basically shipping it to India. So, but if the purchase does not happen in India, then the global players don't basically consider that to be a serious sales opportunity for India. So, how do we change this situation through design, through product creation and other means?
I think it will finally happen through creating our own brands. If India becomes a location where people start to create brands, and also just the way People used to go to China, get a design done, get manufacturing done, bring it back, put their own brand on it and sell it. That opportunity exists for India today. So I think that is where a lot of these changes will take place. And I think very critically, we need to also start to look at creating a very deep component ecosystem. The component ecosystem in this country is very weak today. And the initial effort that was put in creating the component ecosystem needs to be dramatically improved. What we must realize in our PLI schemes and these kind of schemes is that they are aimed at large companies and medium companies. They are not meant for the typical SMEs who actually make components globally. So I think we need to create schemes for these SMEs, and we need to be very specific and identify the 200 or 400 components that we need for the industry, and go and pick those companies and bring them to India and get those components made, number one. Number two, if we start to design products in India, we will source from India. If we don't design products from India, we're not going to source from India, and the kits will keep coming.
What we are saying, and a lot of other people are also saying, the first step to build a component ecosystem is first to start buying the components from India. Today the buying does not happen from India, so that nobody is interested in building the component in India because there is no buyer, right? Because Oppo is not going to buy from an Indian company, they are going to get it as a kit, right? Or Vivo is going to get it as a kit. So what you are saying, and probably Vinod also agrees, that we need to start incentivizing the purchase of the component from India through a local PO, and basically preferably from the local manufacturers. But even if you buy from the global manufacturer, the purchase has to happen from India rather than coming as a package from somewhere else.
It's a chicken and egg thing. It has to happen in parallel. If you place a PO, then the person should be able to give you what you need. It's not that there should be a two-year delay in getting the component. So like Ajay said, we need to have the components, whoever is making them, to come here and start first making them here, so we can actually buy them from here, right? And then we can have domestic players like small,
I'm not
medium
even saying the
enterprise.
manufacturing of the component is going to take time, but today, let's say if I have to look at MediaTek, for example, right? We are consuming a lot of MediaTek processors, but that purchase is not happening through India. So it's a global company. It will take India to manufacture semiconductors some 5-7 years, but even buying is not happening. So MediaTek processors are being used in India, but there is hardly any purchase of MediaTek processor from India, because somebody sitting in China purchased those processors and send it to India, right? So I think the first step towards creating the local ecosystem of manufacturing the component is we have to first start buying first. And the buying will happen when we do the design, as you said, right? Am I correct in that interpretation?
There is another way of short-circuiting this, and the way it would be that we create large component warehouses which are duty-free. We have these complicated duty systems where you can only import, pay duty and then import. You create huge warehouses next to airports and bring in global component companies to come and set up shop here. They've done it in Singapore. Why can't they do it in India? India is a much bigger market. Exactly. So the regional component companies, the warehousing is all in Singapore. It's not here. We should move them here, give them all the facilities, give them incentives, tell them zero duty. You bring them here, store them here, and supply as the customer wants. If it's just in time, people will start buying from here.
So if we start doing the local POs, that will incentivize the companies to put the local POs, because people will not do it till you incentivize it, right? Then that will automatically make the large companies to warehouse it, because now the local POs are happening. So local warehousing will also happen. Is that the right conjecture?
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So I think overall both of you agree that for the long term economic benefit, security benefits, and basically taking India towards the $5 trillion economy, the product design, product ownership at the electronics level, which will also create the demand for semiconductor, is time for such thing has come, and we have to find basically ways to incentivize the product design. So, India has done very good with the PLI in electronics and then semiconductor incentives. What can we do in specific terms to incentivize the design? What are the ways to incentivize the design, so that basically people start taking the risk and putting, because it's not like manufacturing. In product design, if you try 5 products, maybe 3 of them will be successful. So, there is a risk element to it, right. So, what is the way India can create some incentive schemes to incentivize product design and the brand creation?
So India has already created a scheme. It's called Design Link Scheme. So not product link, Design Link Scheme. And it's a very well thought out, broad based, and I'm now one of the
I was part of the scheme,
advisors to that.
basically advising on that scheme.
In there, one of the most fundamental things they have done is they have gone to Cadence, Synopsys, and Mentor and taken those tools, which are very, very expensive, and created a network of accessible tools to any designer sitting anywhere in India to access that tool to start designing. That's the first step. So if you have a computer and you have an idea and you want to get a tool to design, you can start designing. The only thing they haven't yet done is to provide a cloud computing infrastructure so that you don't even have to worry about setting up a server to start your design team. So if you want to design a chip, or you want to design a function, or you design a component, you can today will get a kickstart right away from Government of India to get that process going. On top of that, for a seed stage investment going from Series C to Series A to B to C to D, at each step, the Government of India will give you up to 15 crores at each step to pay for your IT, to pay for labor, to pay for whatever you're doing, without any equity or without any demand, which is really a very significant step, in my opinion, to encourage people to move in that direction. In addition, they have already put into the library that can be accessed free of cost by any designer sitting in India, not only IPs that they have generated through Shakti and RISC-V or CDAC or whatever else they are doing, but even they have license from ARM, which is the most popular processor in the world, and they will be on the library where you can get the ARM, and not the most advanced ARM course, but the early ARM course to start designing things around it. So I'm saying there is a significant amount of activity for them, and then for medium, large scale companies also, there is now twice the amount, like 30 crores, that they can get to get the ball rolling. On top of that, they are giving some incentive of 6% or 8% to create a level playing field
4
between
to 6%.
4 to 6% level playing field between the local vendors and the importers.
So we'll come to semiconductors,
Yeah.
but if design of electronics products has to be incentivized, because the enabling factors are very different for semiconductors than electronics, right? And that's a very large basically opportunity. How do we structure an incentive scheme for electronics products? Maybe we can take basically some of the ideas from the DLI scheme for the fabless semiconductors, but how do we structure, because electronics product will have a large component for the product design also, right, like mechanical and iPhone steel case and all those things which you talked about, right? So in what way we can structure the electronics incentivized scheme for product design?
I think there are 2-3 factors that needed to be taken care of. Our education system doesn't teach people how to make products. So I think that is a major change that we need to bring. Do people understand that how to do design for BOM at the right cost, design for manufacturing, design for service, design for sustainability, design for repairability? All these issues are not taught in our education system. So I think this is the first place we need to start. And second thing that we need to do is to create a DLI scheme which is completely different from products, because product is a very different ball game. Just the way Vin talked about creating libraries, etc., for the semiconductor piece, we also need to create similar environment all over the country. And we need to set up design houses all over the country to start designing products. Invite global design companies to set up product design capabilities here. Involve education and research into this whole effort, so that they also look at product design as a very major piece. Because which IIT today teaches how to design a computer or how to design a phone? None. So I think that is where a major change needs to be brought around. And then the incentive schemes will start to kick in. Then you start doing government procurement by saying all that the government buys, 50% or 70% of that will be bought when you have 50% value addition in India and designed in India. Now all these things need to be combined, put together, and a new scheme for design is created. Then we can be a terrific product nation.
I would agree with everything I just said here and add on to give you an example. For example, in a semiconductor, you have to make a chip, a proof of concept, which is very expensive to go through a fabrication process. But the government of India is now picking up the bill for doing that by letting 500 chips be located into of different chips in which same wafer in a foundry and pay for just your portion of it. Why can't they do the same thing, or why can't we do the same thing for PCB, for example? If a designer walks in and he's trained and he wants to design,
PCB is hardly any cost, right?
No, not just a cost. He may need to go through iteration. He may need access to the tools for design. He may need access to the materials for design. I think we can offer a lot of help.
So that's what I was referring in the semiconductors, the design tools and the basically access to the fab and access to IP is basically major portion of the proof of concept product, right? But electronics is a very different basically kind of the cost factor when I do electronics product, right? The same factors, and that's why I'm laboring this point, is that we have done a very good DLI scheme, and basically I was early part of the discussion of those schemes. But how do we take that and basically create a new scheme, because the driving factor for electronics products are very different?
Yeah, I mentioned that you need to do something similar like what has been done in DLI. For example, in the product area, you also need to provide facilities to all these product startups and product companies to be able to have mechanical design, plastics design, all this integrated into creating a capability set which is available at these design centers. So where you are putting a Cadence tool, you need to also put all these kind of facilities which will actually make a product happen end to end. Today, it's not just about designing the motherboard or designing the software. It's all about mechanical and plastics also, because the product has to be made to look good. And aesthetics are very important in any product. So I think a lot of these facilities need to be provided at various locations in the country, and in addition, provide certification capabilities, so that today a guy who actually designs a product has no place to go to for certification. If you, for example, create a medtech device and you want it proven that it works in India, there is no lab in India which will say, give me that device, I'll do it in 3 months and give it back to you, and I'll certify that it works. So these are all additions that we need to do when we look at product design.
So like what we did in DLI, we said 50% of all your expenses for development other than infrastructure piece will be taken care by the government in form of the reimbursement. Do you think a similar basically concept will work for electronics products also?
But here we should be clear on what we want to do. So we should identify the top 100 products or top 150 products which we want to focus on. Today 80% of medtech electronics is imported. So we should say, okay, these are the 50 products that we want to go after, and all these 50 products will be incentivized. Then you do a focused activity on getting products designed in India.
So taking that point forward, what I hear from the China, what they did is exactly the same, right? They did not say we are going to create a future innovative product. They said this is the product which is needed today. We'll create the focused basically attention on these products, whether it's a chip product, and I'll come to that in a minute, or electronics product, and we'll just basically start designing and manufacturing them basically in the country. So
I don't think the Chinese even did that. I think Chinese just laid out a red carpet for USA after Nixon visited and signed that deal to say we'll open up the market for anyone and everyone to walk in to make microwaves, refrigerators, dishwashers, washers, dryers, your blood pressure equipment, your Medtronic things. They said, come do it.
That was
And
the
in the process,
manufacturing
they have learned. They've created a whole industry which is now serving their local needs.
No, that was the manufacturing piece, but post that they said that okay, we have to basically make a Wi-Fi router. We'll make a same copy of Wi-Fi router which Cisco is making.
Much
right?
easier to do, by the way, if you have 10,000 people who've been doing it day in, day out.
Sure.
Okay? That's the thing you need to remember.
Yeah.
It's not like they did it in vacuum. They did it where they had thousands of people for 10 years building routers for Cisco, and then somebody in Huawei said, let's just copy it and do it and build a company. So you need to keep in mind how China came about. It was really free for all, just build world's largest manufacturing in one country. It's it's producing 60% of the world's needs.
Yeah.
It's a very different ball game.
Yeah, but so what you said is focus on basically 50 or 100 important, impactful, high volume products and start designing them in India
As a start.
as a start, and then from there you can do more basically
200, 500, 1,000, whatever.
so on and so forth, right? So I think we are coming to the end of this conversation. Would like to get your overall strategy, incentives, whatever we have to do to move from the whole discourse in the country has to move from manufacturing to product. I think all of us agree, because that is going to be the real driver, because anywhere we go today the talk is only manufacturing, and in electronics manufacturing is a low value add addition and it's assembly and EMS and so on and so forth. So do you agree that the discourse has to move from manufacturing to products? Then we start talking in government forums, industry association forums and all of those things about products which will drive the manufacturing also, but the discourse has to change from manufacturing to products. Do you agree?
Same thing has happened in software. We started out in the software services industry. We've done brilliantly. Last 10 years, the discourse has changed from just services to product development. Everybody in India used to ask, why don't we have a Google in India? Why don't we have a Microsoft in India? It's not going to happen unless you actually put some effort behind it. NASSCOM started that effort. A think tank called iSpirit went after it. In the last 8 to 10 years, you've started seeing global Indian software products. So I think that same discourse has to happen, and same attention to creating this kind of an organization and a capability is required to make India a product nation. And I think right through the government, right through the industry, there has to be deep creation of capability sets, education, research, which I talked about, creating of environment for making products, and then creating a market for these products in India. The best way to create markets in these products is, to my mind, look at just government procurement. Open it up to startups, open it up to all companies and say, if you design in India, we'll give you the benefit of buying from the government. Today, for example, just look at UP government. They want to buy 20 million tablets. I mean, they're going to buy 20 million tablets, they're going to spend money on it. Why don't they buy Indian product? Why don't they buy a product that's designed and manufactured in India? Even if it's manufactured in India by a global company, go ahead and buy it. But give benefit to the companies that are actually manufacturing here. You can change the complete complexion of the volume of India very easily because India is buying a lot of electronics. And I think that change needs to be brought around.
But not only change the volume, if we make it a nation of products,
Yes.
That's what.
the margin of profit will more than double. It'll skyrocket. It'll go from like Foxconn is making 7, 8, 10% to what Apple is
So
making
that's the revenue.
50,
If you-
60%.
If you look at the EBITDA of basically any EMS company, it is somewhere around 3 to 4%.
Yeah. Look at Foxconn.
Yeah.
You know, it's a contract manufacturer. It's very low profit margin. If you do product design, suddenly your profit margin will become significant.
And there are examples happening in India right this moment. Companies like Boat and Noise have come up. Initially, they started getting designs done in China, etc., etc. They're now moving their designs to India. And their margins will dramatically improve.
Yes. And there's no harm in starting wherever they're starting from.
Yes.
Question is where you are going.
Correct.
And where we want to go is to really build a, like he said, very well put it, Satya did, a product nation,
Yes.
not just a manufacturer.
So, lot of people say product designing things is very expensive. So, I'll ask you a very pointed question. If we have to do a India cell phone as a product, not as a chip or anything, just a product which is equivalent to Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus, what kind of investment may be needed to create a product which will be using global component, and now the designs are more or less standard, as you said, right? That there's hardly any difference in a design between Oppo and iPhone, right? In your estimate, how much money and effort it will take to create a globally competitive in terms of the features, look and feel, and the price, to create a mobile phone from India, India designed, India manufactured?
It's not just a question of cost, Satya. I think we need to look long term. If we design one product, we need to keep designing family of these products over a period of time. So I think that's where the strategy has to be developed by different companies who want to create products. Many years ago, I think this was about 20, 30, 25 years ago, I did a program for the government which was called Carol. And I looked at a list of products that we should design from scratch. And I went to the whole industry and said, why can't we all get together and design an India's smartphone, an India tablet, and an India laptop and all of that. The government agreed. But then everything sort of fell apart, and people changed in MeitY, and people didn't take it forward. If we had done that 20 years ago, we would be a product nation today. So I think it's just a question of focus.
So I asked this question because there is a lot of myth about that. It takes hundreds
So
of
let me
millions
ask,
dollars.
let me
right?
answer that question.
Just 1 second.
This Oppo phone that you keep on talking about, how much does it cost to buy in India? Can you tell me that?
Costs about 18,000 rupees.
18,000 rupees. Then you can build a phone in India for 9,000 rupees and sell it for 10,000 and still be profitable highly if you start designing the kind of things value add he's talking about, because that will not cost more hardware cost. Those are value adds that are coming from application. So you can literally be very profitable, and if you are like Ambani's are in communication also, you can merge various services together. Literally your cost of building becomes very secondary. What is important is the value you're providing to the customer,
Fully understand.
and that becomes the most important. So,
So I was-
10,000 rupees
And
is your
features
cost.
like what we talked about earlier, repairability.
I understand.
And sustainability,
Yeah.
and ensure that we don't have huge amount of e-waste being created in India.
So 10,000 rupees is what, $100, is it? Am I doing my math
10,000
correctly?
rupees is 1,200.
Yeah, it'll be very soon 100 if the economies go the way they do.
So-
So $100 will be your cost. That's the answer to your own question.
See, I asked that specific
Cost of
question.
development, Satya, will not be more than a couple of $1 million. Nothing.
yeah.
Yeah,
Nothing.
because,
Nothing.
yeah, I just wanted to ask you, because through Epic Foundation, you are trying to design a completely India designed, India made basically tablet, right, which will have a complete hardware and software ownership in India. And you would have some estimate that how much money it takes. If I translate that into phone, which is slightly more complicated device, do you think a $10 million investment can create a globally competitive, in all aspect, phone from India?
Very easily. Maybe you don't even need 10 million.
Absolutely.
We are
I think if you start to think about what Vin was talking about, adding value from India, creating Indian software, creating Indian, education software, health software, all of that, and you bundle that in the product and make it very Indian and put Aadhaar Connect directly, you may have something so unique that nobody will be able to do something. So it's not just the money; it's all our imagination.
And let
so
me
the
share
myth
something.
is that it takes a lot of investment into
And
this
let me
thing.
share something
Yeah.
else unique about India. India is one of the only few countries in the world that have talent both in software and if we do this product in design. That's very rare. One of the reasons why Japan did not keep up in semiconductors, because they were very, very good in microminiaturization and hardware. But when the industry moved to software, operating systems and BIOSes and applications, they were really not keeping up, whether it was the language was the issue or whatever, I do not know, but they couldn't keep up and they moved away from it. Same thing you see in Korea. They're very good in hardware, by the way, because DRAMs and all these NANDs and things, these are all hardware chips. Moment you go into software, these countries are not as good as we are, fortunately. So if we can combine these two, we can absolutely blow
We
the
can
world
be
away.
world beaters if we
Absolutely.
combine hardware and
No
software.
doubt about
and
it. No doubt about it.
We can really rule the world in,
We
the,
can.
in the business of products.
Definitely we can.
So, to coming to the end of this discussion and very interesting and lively fireside chat, I think from both of your inputs, I think we have all the ingredients to make India as a product nation. We have to just bring all the different silos of expertise together, like manufacturing, manpower, 3 Ma's which we talked in the beginning, right? Manufacturing, market and basically manpower, and basically put a recipe with some investment which is not very used. As you said, $10 million is good enough to create a cell phone, and $1 million may be good enough to create a tablet, right? We can basically very successfully convert India from a manufacturing hub to a product hub in next 5 to 7 years.
So it's manufacturing to product and software services to product.
Absolutely.
That's the direction for us.
Because in each case, there's a value add, which is what we are looking for.
Sure. Thank you so much. And as I said in the beginning, this is the first edition of the Epic Conversation. We'll bring you more such interesting conversation, strategy and in-depth understanding of complete ecosystem, how to build India as a product nation from various different angles. Various global experts will bring you to the table. Thank you, Vinod. Thank you, Ajay, for basically sharing this 1 hour in very important topic for the India.
Thank you, Satya.
Thank you.